Along to other things. You're watching Q&A. Our next question tonight comes from Deb Corbin.
Okay. After the massacre in Afghanistan, US Staff Sergeant Bates has been returned to America for trial. If a US soldier that was posted to Darwin was to murder an Australian civilian, wouldn't we expect that they'd be tried in Australia?
Toby Ralph.
Yes, we would. The US, I believe, give an undertaking to their troops that they won't be tried overseas if they're found guilty of something which wasn't designed for an incident like this. It appears in this case that this guy's gone nuts, killed 16 people, including 9 babies, and set them on fire afterwards. It sounds reprehensible. It appears to be so. But the US have guaranteed their troops that they'll always be tried at home if there's a legal problem. That's why this is happening, I think. Yeah,
tell us about this incident. Robert Fisk, the rather famous and irascible Middle East correspondent, has actually said the way that the Americans have treated this man, and the commentators are treating him, is if they're apologising for him having a mental illness and a mental breakdown. Fisk says you never get that kind of apology when it comes to the other side of the coin. If an Afghan did something similar, you wouldn't be hearing that he was mentally deranged, simply that he was a mad terrorist.
Exactly right.
And is that a problem? Is that a problem of perception?
Yes, of course there's a problem there, and you know, there is a war and truth is a casualty. And they need to carefully attempt to manipulate the position so they can continue what they see as helping that country. So there's it's inaccurate and untrue.
Jermaine.
It's the most dreadful situation. I mean, this man had been made to do a 4th tour of duty. He'd been already injured twice. He'd lost part of a foot. His wife was fed up with him having a 4th tour of duty. But more to the point, he is in a country where he is not wanted. Now, the same thing happened in Vietnam. You had all these bewildered Americans who were suddenly in somebody else's country, which they're meant to be saving from something, and the people hate them. The people are blowing them up. The people are, in the case of Vietnam, you know, we had bombs hidden in the huts that the guys were living in and so on. So he sees a man the day before get his leg blown off by an IED. Now, the improvised explosive devices are laid in the roads by the Taliban by night. You cannot tell me that the civilian population don't know that they're there. We are not wanted in Afghanistan by anybody, and now not even by Hamid Karzai.
Jermaine, I'm just going to interrupt you because we've got another question on this, and we'll bring in the rest of the panel when we hear from our questioner, and the questioner is Benjamin Daniels.
Hi, yeah, I'm an American living in Australia, and I guess around this I saw on the email Q&A sent out that someone on the panel, I forget who it was exactly, was advocating that Australia stay in Afghanistan for decades to come to do really good work. And since I've been in Australia, I've kind of struggled to understand why Australia is even in Afghanistan, and I don't know what. America's a whole other story, but you know, this is the country I'm in now. But I just wonder what more time of Australians being in Afghanistan would do for Australia or Afghanistan, Afghanis, and it seems like it'd just be years more of deaths and injuries and trauma.
Okay, well, I'm going to go, first of all, back to Toby, because that was a reference to you, because I think you do believe if we're going to be there, we need to be there for decades.
I think we do. I haven't been into Afghanistan since just before the last election, and I spent some time there, and I spent quite a lot of time talking to the villagers. I was very surprised and shocked to learn at that time, and it may have changed since, but at that time there was cautious support from most villagers for international intervention. These people are terrified of the Taliban in many cases. Terrified of them. They restrict their rights, they treat their women like livestock, and they want them out, but they don't have the guts to take them on. Eventually, when the villages turn against the Taliban, they'll be able to have some choice. They want choice, not necessarily Western-style democracy, but they want choice in their lives. And they're reluctant to team with international forces because Afghanistan, since the time of Alexander the Great, has had invaders flooding in and then being chased away. A Taliban put it to me very succinctly. He pointed at my wrist and he said, "You have the watches, we have the time." So if we're going to be in Afghanistan, if we're going to help that beleaguered country, then let's stay there and do the job properly, not sort of bail out halfway through.
That would mean an unlimited commitment, though, wouldn't it? Just based on the that analogy you just made.
Yep, it does.
Krista Hughes.
I'm just anti-war. History's proven again and again and again and again and again. It is so destructive, so futile and so horrendous. And it's, poor Afghanistan, yes, the Russians came in, so then the Americans armed the Taliban to fight the Russians, then the Americans came in to fight the lot that they had armed earlier to fight them. Like, it's just a disaster. No one should be there. The Afghanis should be in Afghanistan.
Well, you missed out on September 11, which was sort of in the middle there, and that's why the Americans went there to take Afghanistan.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, even though there were no Afghanis on that plane. But, you know, No, I don't think Australia should be there. It's a pity we went there. It's a pity American got... It's just horrendous. I just find war so repulsive. And the longer it drags out and the more confused it becomes, and the longer America and Australia stays there, the more the extra tension and internal fractions seem to be carrying on. Which we started in the first place.
Let's get Craig's perspective on this once again.
And I don't get it either. I mean, I have no idea why we continue to stay in all these places. You know, watching the Republican debates right now about what's going on in Israel and should we go, you know, where should we go next? I love, and I'm not a huge supporter of Ron Paul, but he was the smartest one on the panel to go, hey guys, like, we have no money. Like, we're at $13 trillion in debt. We can't fund this. We can't continue to pay for this. Not only talking about is it right or should we go, I think, like, we're broke and we're worried about all these other... And it's awful. It sounds like what's happening over there. But why is it our job to fix that? And so I say we stay out of it.
We've got a few hands up over in the audience here. We'll get a microphone down there. In the meantime, Ben, what do you think?
I think it's a little bit trickier than that. I mean, look, I predominantly am anti-war as well. I, like the rest of Australia, opposed the Iraq War. I marched against it. I think with the Afghanistan War, when it came to September 11, we were on the hunt for Osama bin Laden, who was being harboured by the Taliban in Afghanistan. We were looking for him. And I think, in principle, that was a just thing to do. But now, over 10 years later, the situation has changed. Osama bin Laden has been found and killed in Pakistan, of all places. Now, we've actually become a part of a coalition that has changed the course of Afghanistan's history. And I think what we need to be wary of is our responsibilities in ensuring that there is a smooth transition to a stable government. I think the only problem with that assertion is, at what point do you actually say, yes, it's stable now, we can go? I think that's a very, very difficult thing to define.
And we've got a couple of hands up here. We'll hear from both of these two people. You first, sir.
Aren't the Taliban simply very conservative Afghanis? And if we are optimistic about the Afghanis running their own country, wouldn't the majority outvote them?
And we'll get around to hear from this lady on the edge there. Just hang on, we'll get the microphone to you. There we go.
My question is, what particularly puts us as members of Western nations in a position of superiority where we can assume what is right and wrong for these people in other countries? We may be better resourced, but we're certainly not the best resourced. And we're not without our own political problems, so who are we to say what's right and wrong in the first place?
Let's go to Toby.
Sorry, what was the first question again, briefly?
Will the Taliban be outvoted, essentially?
You don't outvote people who cut people's heads off. That's the problem with the Taliban. Democracies are not free. They've just had an election there. Democracies are not free and fair there. It's not representative voting. It's rigged, and the Taliban run the regions anyway. It's 34 regions. The Karzai is called the mayor of Kabul because he has so little influence outside it. So, no, it's not as simple as a free and fair election. In terms of interventionism, it's failed massively on many occasions. We don't have a right, but maybe we have some responsibilities. I mean, it's failed in oh, you name it, Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Palestine. It's had some successes in places like Haiti and Kampuchea, but invariably interventions, particularly imperialist ones without a withdrawal plan and a lot of sort of just cause rationale, don't work and end up hurting the country. You're right.
Jermaine, briefly to you, because we are running out of time.
Look, in the 21st century, war is too destructive to use. It can only create further chaos. It can only introduce a whole new set of crises into an already critical situation. There is no way that anyone will accept an occupying army, no matter what story they tell about themselves. Even people who would have been pro-Western in Afghanistan are not pro-Western anymore because of what it's like to live with an army. Australia's got...
What about East Timor, by the way?
Well, what about East Timor?
Well, we sent our army in there to keep the peace, to protect people. There is this idea in the United Nations now called the responsibility to protect. It's what happens when dictators start killing their civilians.
Well, it's also what happens when Al Jazeera tells us lies about what dictators are doing to control their civilians. The whole Libyan disaster, I mean, we still haven't figured out what we've done there, except probably split Libya in half. And that was on pretty bad information. Likewise, Iraq, bad information. What was really going on? I mean, Australia has a delusion that it should be on the Security Council, that it's actually one of the ruling nations of this beleaguered planet. We have to snap out of all of that, and we have to get smart. We have to do the thing you do at the end, you know? We can't do the war. We're going to have to go straight to the jaw. We're going to have to start talking. But we can't talk to these people until we at least learn their language.
OK. As I said, we're coming to the end of tonight's Q&A.